connection as we talk about the strange world of internet switches and all the things they're used for these days and all the things that go into them. With a man who knows an awful lot about this, welcome back for another conversation, Henry Martel. Hey, guy.
Hey.
We thank you for joining us again. If I got that right, is it the world of internet switches? Is that the best way to describe this world here?
I would describe it more as the world of industrial internet switches.
Industrial, and that's the big difference. We talked about this the last time because even if I've got a big factory or a big office, I think I just go down to Best Buy or something. I go on. I just got internet switch is an internet switch, right? But as we've learned over the last few episodes here, there is a big difference. You might not be able to make a connection with just something off the shelf, or it might not last real long, right?
And typically, it's the latter. Switches don't last long in harsh industrial environments.
So you're building stuff. You guys build what? Switches to survive the extremes, all sorts of things. Give me a couple of crazy worlds where you guys install switches here.
So, mines, oil rigs, oil
mines,
pipelines.
right off the top, way at the bottom of some mine here. Water, corrosion, extreme temperatures, hot and cold, all that, right?
Yeah, and you wouldn't think that you would need internet connectivity in a mine, but you do. There's wireless, there's Bluetooth, there's beacons, and there's communications through radio. So the industrial internet space is its own little unique environment that people don't really know much about. But once you start to talk to them a little bit about our applications and where we're at, it starts to make sense.
Well, today we're going to talk about a feature that you guys have had kind of quietly for a couple of years. And now maybe it's because of the pandemic and shutdowns and remote work or remote everything. But it's such a simple thing. And I would think it would be on everybody's switch. And that is something you guys are calling Ping Alive. What is Ping Alive?
So Ping Alive is a feature on our power over Ethernet switches. And what it does is it automates the rebooting process of a communication error that's detected. So, for instance, if you have a switch and, it's a PSE, a power sourcing device,
right.
It provides voltage through the cable to an edge device. It could be a camera, it could be a sensor, a telephone. And for some reason, the edge device loses communication through configurable parameters on our switch. The port will the switch will reboot the port that device is connected to. And that saves a lot of time and it saves a lot of headaches because in situations where you have cameras, for instance, that's a real big...
Everybody's got remote cameras.
Yeah, everybody has cameras. And so when they stall or when they freeze, a simple reboot of the camera usually fixes the problem. But in some cases, you don't have access to the network or you have an integrator who's not concerned with the network, but they're just concerned with their portion, their camera.
Sure.
And, they're called out for a trouble caller ticket and, they got to roll out a truck and go get a ladder and crawl up and disconnect and reconnect the camera or a sensor that, went through an update or whatever it is. And for the device to come back alive. And with our feature, what it does is you set a parameter where it'll send out a ping or like a communication packet.
What's a ping? A ping's like it sounds like something I'd see in a sci-fi movie. A little ping, just a little sound, a little notice, little bit of data just to say, is anybody there?
That's all it is. Just a little bit of data, just the reference data to send out a request, and the end device receives it and it sends it right back.
Right.
So just like a little acknowledgement.
And so I would have thought every device would have this in there because I don't want to go down to the bottom of the mine and rehook up the camera. I don't want to go up to the top of an oil rig. I don't want to go to some extreme location. I don't want to find it in the back of the factory here. I want to just know, is anybody there? And if they are communicating, can they just reset themselves?
Yeah, and you would think it'd be, like standard procedure, right?
I would think, yeah.
Everyone would have this feature, but they don't. And we've had it, like I said, we've quietly had it in the background. A lot of integrators, they're usually are the ones who have the most questions about it. But since they don't really get into the programming of the switches, they just kind of plug and play their devices.
Yeah.
They don't really get they don't know the switches. They don't know the technology that's available in the switches. So when we go to these trade shows, you start talking to integrators about some of our features, and you tell them, hey, this exists. This Ping Alive feature exists that we can remotely reboot your cameras or your sensors or whatever you guys are installing. it's the next greatest thing since sliced bread.
Is it like bringing fire to the natives? They'll go, ooh, look at that. Wow.
Yeah, you would the faces people make when they realize that I didn't have to take a 2-hour call to roll out a truck and go climb a ladder to unplug and reseat plug a camera back in.
Honest to God.
The switch does it automatically and then sends a notification. Wow.
So do all your switches support this, or just some of them?
Just some of our switches are power over Ethernet switches because it's a power over Ethernet feature that's designed in the switch.
Can we talk about that for 1 second? Because now I'm going to geek a little bit here. So I have this radio station, this whole recording studio, and we recently put some cameras into our newer studio that were hooked up to power over Ethernet. Otherwise, they're a little battery, and then I got to charge the batteries, and the batteries run out. So now when I plug in the Ethernets, I don't have to just plug in the power. I can get power from that Ethernet switch. Is that something that more and more people are using? To me, it was like, this was like a revelation. I didn't know you could power a camera with an Ethernet switch.
Yeah. So the technology has been around for a while, and in the beginning there was certain standards, and going into power over Ethernet can go into its own conversation. There's a lot of technology behind it. But
I hope you'll come back and tell us that, because I think it's a new world. Because otherwise, then I got to have two things. I got to have a power source somewhere nearby in that mine.
Mm-hmm.
I got to have a plug then that goes into that power source. But if I can run an Ethernet cable, same thing that's connecting it to the internet. That Ethernet cable can run, hundreds of feet, long time.
Yeah, it can run up to 328 feet.
Wow.
So, and now with the higher voltage switches that we have, the BT standards, we're getting up to 90 watts and above that we can send power to. So, because everything is going over power over Ethernet, we're getting a lot more questions about some of the features, and I guess that's where Ping Alive is really starting to kind of come into its own now.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do have questions about it, and we do a lot of conversation about applications and what you can use it, and some of the features involved with it, and how to program it. And it's pretty simple. It's not really complicated. It's maybe 1 or 2 check boxes here. You basically go to the feature, you turn it on, you set the address of the remote device that you want to reach out to, and then you set the interval. You want to send out a ping every 10 seconds, every 30 seconds, every minute. And after 3 consecutive failures, the switch will reboot the port. And send
Switch knows I better reset this thing. Something's not working here. So that's the basic configuration. That's because I think an awful lot of your switches, people probably just plug them in. They plug in the Ethernet port. They plug in the power or whatever. Well, now you're going to power it over an Ethernet port, perhaps, but. Whatever it is, they're plugging in 1 or 2 things, and they're not looking at all the other features in there. Is that correct? Are they underutilizing what you guys have built in?
Yeah, underutilized is the perfect word. They probably use maybe 20 to 30% of the switch's features, and it's just because from our experience, a lot of the guys who are installing our switches, they're not the network admins. They're not into all the little features. They're not trying to get into the nitty-gritty portion
Right.
of the switch. They're at the edge. They're at the our network.
Is that what you
switch.
call it? You're at the edge. You're at the last point of connection here.
Yeah, and so typically you have your big, your corporate network or your enterprise network, and that it connects to your industrial network.
Right.
And we're in that industrial space, so we're like a second hop away, like the second tier, if you will.
Right.
And then that's where you're going to connect your industrial cameras, or you're going to connect your industrial sensors. And so we belong to such a small little space that the guys who are setting it up, might know a little bit about security. They might know a little bit about some of the settings, isolation, things like that. But they don't get involved in all the different features.
Because they're
of the
there
switch.
to do one thing. I want to make this camera work. I want to make this sensor work. They're not thinking about, well, what else could this device be doing, or how else can it be set up so that it's automated, it's more functional, it has more capabilities.
Yeah, and they don't ask, and we want to give them the information, but if we don't know what they don't know, we can't give it to
Exactly.
them.
If they don't ask and say, hey, can it do this? Then why would you tell them? I mean, you can try to tell them everything, but they may not even be listening. Yeah. Does it hook up the camera?
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Does the camera turn on? Yeah.
All right, so give me some other scenarios when this Ping Alive might play an important role.
So the biggest ones we've seen so far are with the cameras, and with sensors. So in some
And these are sensing anything. It might be sensing temperature. It might be
pressure,
pressure or something. Right?
fluid levels, wherever there's a sensor.
Right.
Sometimes those sensors will go through like an update. Right, we got a new firmware. We reach out to them. We install the firmware. We do an update for it, and then suddenly it doesn't come back on, right? Or it's not responding the way it should.
Right.
And so in that case, that sensor could stall, and through the ping alive, it'll lose communication. It loses communication, and then the ping alive will detect the non-communication and then reboot the sensor by itself.
And let me stop you for 1 second, because I have to me, this is a complicated rig here in our studio. We've got mixers, we've got monitors, we've got various inputs and audio inputs and all this crazy stuff. It's a daisy chain. That's the way I think of it, of all these connected devices. And something doesn't work. Right now you come in, we're going to record something. It doesn't work. So I have to start going backwards. Is it the mic? Is it the cable? Is it the mixer? Is it the computer? Is it the software? And I'm trying to isolate each one of these things. It's like the old Christmas tree lights when I was a kid. You're too young to remember old Christmas tree lights. But we get them all up and nothing would happen. And then Dad would laboriously go and try and find the one dud in the line, which took forever because one dud short-circuited the whole thing here. It's only as good as the weakest link. And so your internet switch, if it can take one of those things out of there, that would seem like a huge saving, because one more piece, I know, okay, that piece is working right.
Yeah. Well, you figure like a scenario, maybe like a security camera, right? You're looking over a parking structure, a parking lot, and something happens, right? In the middle of the night, the camera goes out, right? And it just needs a simple reboot. Well, for that specific amount of time.
Sounds like a Tom Cruise movie here, Mission Impossible, and the cameras are always going out, and they bang on the thing, and they go, oh, the heck with it, it always goes out, yeah.
Yeah, and so, the concern that I've seen with integrators is that a camera goes out, something happens, and there's no footage. And so when there's no footage of that specific instance, and that there's liability.
Yeah.
And if you had a camera,
sure as shoot, that's when something's going to happen, when the camera goes out.
Yeah, and it's going to go out at 2:00 in the morning when no one's watching.
Right.
So if this this feature allows that camera to reboot and reinitialize itself and restore communication, that helps eliminate that portion of the liability.
And if it's rebooted itself and still doesn't come on, then that tells you what? It's probably the camera then, or something.
Yeah, it could be something else. It could be a bird had pecked on it, or maybe a rodent had chewed through the wires, or something along that's just a little bit more involved than just a simple reset.
So you start with the basic and let it reset itself and see if that fixes it. If it doesn't, then you can send a crew out and decide, all right, something more serious or something more involved here. So, but you guys deal with stuff that can't break. It can't go down.
Right.
I mean, it's a pressure switch, and that thing will blow, or bad things will happen, or the heat sensor or whatever, the whole thing will be ruined, or something bad will happen because somebody's supposed to monitor this 24/7, and it's critical. Maybe a security camera, you say, okay, so we didn't watch the parking lot for an hour or two, but the stuff you deal with is a lot more sensitive and a lot more, it seems like, can't go down, urgent.
Right, and if it goes down, it has to come up immediately or send out notifications.
Yeah.
So in a situation where you have a gas sensor pressure, when that goes offline and it just needs to reconnect, as it's going offline, it comes back up. That might take a good 2 minutes versus someone actually having to dispatch to go track that down, to go figure out what's going on with that. So that
critical applications where they've got to instantly go figure this thing out. So if you can save them all that time and effort, I can imagine you would save lots of critical things that could go wrong here.
Yeah.
Just because you got the switch or the sensor or the camera back online here. All right, so how often does it do it? Does it just monitor? Maybe this is a bad analogy. I mentioned this to you beforehand, but years ago when that Malaysian airliner was lost, apparently the black box pings periodically. Say, I'm here, I'm out there. And that's when they knew this plane was still flying somewhere in the wrong direction, because for some reason this box, I don't know, nobody will ever know what happened to that crew. They all fell asleep, they all lost oxygen, whatever it was. But they didn't crash because the plane was still flying, because this box kept pinging them in weird places it wasn't supposed to be. It was in a whole different direction here. So is it that same sort of thing? It's just periodically, like on an aircraft, it's constantly sending out a signal, and you decide how often you want it to ping you?
Yeah, there's a parameter that shows you the interval. You can create the interval for the ping. So, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. I believe the longest interval you can set up, I believe, is 3 minutes, but I'm not 100% sure.
Because these are critical things. You can't go 3 minutes sounds like, who cares? 3 minutes, if it's a pressure sensor and something's going to blow or break or whatever here, or a heat sensor, something's going to really go wrong with this expensive equipment we've got here at the bottom of a mine or in an oil rig or some other sorts of things. You can't wait for 3 minutes, must be forever.
Yeah, and so imagine. So let's just say you set it for even for 1 minute. After a minute, it doesn't receive a ping. It'll wait 3 consecutive failed pings. So you're waiting 3 minutes for that port to reinitialize.
Yeah. Right.
So realistically, maybe set it for 5 seconds or 10 seconds would probably be a better parameter for the application. But we do have that interval, for critical or non-critical equipment. But having that interval of time that you can dictate and you can set yourself, depending on your application, I think is a really big help.
So ping alive. You're telling me that all the other industrial switches out there, this is not a common feature. This is not an absolute requirement for everybody in a critical application here?
I can't speak on other manufacturers just because I don't like to get involved with that portion of it. But I know that at Antaira, it's important to us, and so that's why we've added it to our switches.
And are people suddenly paying attention to it more now? Maybe because we're more remote these days, maybe because we're increasing, the Internet of Things is spreading rapidly and everything's connected out there, and suddenly people are realizing, hey, we can't just say, oh, the camera's down, we'll get to it tomorrow here.
Yeah, it's becoming a hot topic. We're getting a lot of conversation with it. A lot of our integrators, a lot of our customers are asking about the Ping Alive and how the feature works, and we're dealing more on the customer and walking them through the programming of the feature. So it's definitely come up a lot more.
Well, it's something that I assumed they all had, and I'm beginning to, I smile because maybe the simplest answer is often the best answer. And even on the switches you've had for years now, I'll bet there are people that haven't even set it up or don't even know it's there.
Yeah. You'd be surprised that we've told people about it and they still don't set it up because they don't want to go through it. They don't want to hassle with it. But yeah, it's definitely a feature I would use to monitor, critical equipment, or if I have a piece of equipment that really needs to be, monitored or needs to be noticed. I would definitely have that Ping Alive set on that.
Go back in time here, back to earlier when you were on the integrations side of this, when you were the guy running out to set these things up in place in some remote location. Would this have helped? How much time would this have saved?
Well, let me tell you a funny story about the time we got stuck in freezers. So
you got stuck in a freezer?
Yeah, we got stuck in a freezer. We were working. I had my own little company going, and we were installing cameras in these freezers. They would flash freeze this generic synthetic shrimp. And we would go in there. And
synthetic shrimp? Is that what
it's called like Hiva or whatever it is.
Right.
It's kind of like
fake shrimp.
Fake shrimp, yeah, or fake crab. I'm sorry, fake crab.
Fake crab, all right.
And we'd have to put on these cold suits to go into these freezers because they were like, minus 5 degrees. And so we would have to go in there, and we could only be in there for like 10 minutes. And then you have to go up there and you try to install these cameras and get everything situated. So we set up as a team. So I would go up, and then the next man would go up, and the next man would go up to install this camera. And so we had installed 4 cameras in the freezers. Well, 2 days later, the camera went offline. Oh. And so they called us to go back up there and to go reset these cameras. Yeah. Well, in order to get into those kind of freezers and the freezer suits, it takes a little bit of effort and organization.
It's not 2 minutes just to put them on.
It's not. And then to drive out there, right? So if I would have had this Ping Alive feature at that time, this would have saved me.
And what'd you do when you got out there? You got stuck in the freezers for some reason?
So we were out there, and the way the doors locked was you could open it from the inside or open it from the outside. Right. So we were locked. We went in. They closed the doors behind us, and we're inside the freezers, and we couldn't. We went up there, jiggled some stuff around.
Jiggled some stuff. Is that the official term?
Yeah, we use jiggle. So we disconnected these adapters, reseated everything, came back down. As we came back down, the doors were jammed. Oh. We couldn't get the door to open, so we I'm cold, so I'm not knocking. I'm kicking the door.
Yeah,
I'm kicking,
I want out.
yeah, so we're kicking the doors, and then the other guy, they pull the doors open from the other side. I'm like, bro, I'm like, when you come out of
Gonna
those
get
suits,
frostbite,
your hands are burning.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm mad, I'm upset. I'm like you're only in there for like 15 seconds. Calm down. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like it's a cold 15 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't ready for that, and so yeah.
So had the switch just reset itself, we could have avoided that whole scenario, perhaps. Here.
But that was a 3-hour scenario.
Wow.
3-hour scenario.
Well, think about it, folks. Anybody out there with a active, an important critical application, a remote application that you can't wait 3 minutes, much less 3 hours, how much faster would this be if it just reset itself? Constantly communicating, constantly seeing if it has a good connection here, and if it doesn't, resets itself. Does that take care of the problem quite often? It's just that simple, resetting it?
It does. I want to say it probably takes care of about 70 to 80% of the problem.
Oh my goodness! I was going to say 10%.
Oh no, it's more than that.
It's more than that. Well, because I guess it's probably hard to maintain. It's why you guys exist. Again, industrial Ethernet switches are not off-the-shelf products here. They're in extreme conditions. They're under pressure. They're under heat. They're corrosion. There's dirt. There's all sorts of stuff, and all of those things stop the connection or can potentially degrade the connection, make it go bad. Right?
Yeah. And in this industrial space, it's a little different than your typical office environment, and things typically break.
Yeah.
And so you need to have the right equipment to make sure that when things break or they go down, you're ready for them, and you get the notifications, and you have everything in place. And yeah, that's the space that we operate in.
Well, I'd love to hear more about it, because you're in a world most of us know nothing about, never think about, and yet if it breaks, oh my God, all of a sudden, I just picture aircraft or spacecraft or oil wells or mines or, critical things that suddenly we're offline and everybody's in a panic here.
Yeah, well, imagine chemical plants, right? You're mixing chemicals, or high vision, where you're processing lipsticks, but you're taking an image of 1,000 lipsticks, every 3 seconds.
Is that what they do to try and see if it's uniform or whatever?
Yeah. And so that goes offline. Imagine how much money is being lost.
How many lipsticks fly through in that those few minutes or few hours as they're trying to figure that they can't look at them anymore. Oh my goodness. Well, sometimes it's just for want of a nail, the whole house falls down. It's that simple, the simplest little piece. And you've taken care of that and built that in. And for those that want to know more, how do they find out more about your company in this world that you guys play in?
But the best way to get to know us at Antaira is to actually just go to our website, www.antaira.com.
And let's spell it.
A-N-T-A-I-R-A. Oh, I'm sorry. ANTAIRA.com. We've got some really good graphics on there. We've got some really good stories on there, some application stories. We have a really good team that takes care of our literature for us. And, anything that you need or any kind of questions you have, you can go through and you'll find the answers there. And it shows all our latest products. It shows you all the switches. There's some literature and stuff if you have questions about the different industries
and
that we
stories
serve.
like this one, where we just kind of point out either features or customer stories from time to time about simple things that you wouldn't otherwise think about. That somewhere buried in the brochure in the spec sheet there is something called Ping Alive, and if you haven't checked it out, definitely do so, because it may be the lifesaver for your critical application here.
Yeah, little feature.
Little feature, a lot of importance. Thanks for coming in, Henry Martel from Antaira. We hope you'll join us again for the most interesting conversations about a world most of us know nothing about. The world of industrial Ethernet switches and the importance of keeping everything online.